welcome to the HRHuddle. It's great to have so many of you here with us again today. So we're going to discuss going back to work post-lockdown. We've got 3 guest speakers. Firstly, Jacqui Stretton, who has kindly agreed to share her experience in the preparations she's put in place with the packaging manufacturing company she works for. They've been open throughout, and so she's going to share her insights. Following on from that, we have Anna Stretton, who works for a membership organisation. They support a variety of businesses, and she's going to share the HR advice and guidance she's providing her clients with. And then finally, we've got Keeley, our employment lawyer, who will tackle the topic from the legal angle. So I know, because I've spoken to lots of you, that you guys are doing lots of good things as well. So please share what you're doing and ask questions using the chat box. Any questions you've already emailed in to me should be covered in the session already. But anything new, feel free to put it in the chat box, and I'll ask as we're going along. So let's get started. Jacqui, can I pass over to you so you can share with us what you've implemented and learnt over the last few months of COVID-19 and lockdown?
Of course. So hi everyone. I'll just share my screen because I put together a few pictures so you won't see me. There we go.
Can everybody see Jackie's screen?
You see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so as Eloisa said, we've worked all the way through. So we're part of the food supply chain. We make metal packaging for tins and drinks, so food tins and drinks. So we started putting measures in place a long time ago, so beginning of March, with temperature checking on entry and leaving for anyone on site, initially by handheld thermometers. And recording them daily. Obviously, the introduction of gloves, sanitizers and masks. In the initial stages, masks were voluntary, and obviously all of our equipment was given to visitors and contractors. However, we did shut the site to anyone that wasn't essential, and we did that from March really to at that stage we didn't really know how bad it was, but it turned out to be quite a good decision at the time. I don't quite know why I've got all these. So we did an isolation room. So if anybody had a high temperature, we allocated a room specifically for us to go back and recheck temperature 30 minutes later. And obviously if they remained high, and it wasn't just because they'd had the heater in the car or whatever, they were sent home. Whilst people waiting, masks and stuff were available if people came in contact. Additional cleaning, of course, came into place very early on, and that's increased over time. So absolutely more cleaning, concentrating on communal areas, and obviously supplies put in those areas for people to do their own cleaning as well if they wanted to. And we're seeing more and more of that happen as well now over and above. And then we obviously phased people to work from home where possible. So laptops, desktops went home to try and reduce the footfall of people in the building because we can't reduce the production staff. So with regards to lorries and deliveries, drivers were asked to stay in their trucks where possible. Where not possible, we put additional screens and windows so people can talk through those, through that way. And handovers were done not face to face, but through a hatch with regards to paper, etc. So again, just minimising contact. So with regards to social areas, we've got 1 person per table per in the canteen. And also in the break rooms that we have, we physically took chairs and tables out so that people couldn't squash them together or forget and sit more than 1 per table. So we found that that was the best way to do that, rather than rely on them to remember. Once you're in our building, it's quite easy to forget about COVID because it's normal working for us. So we had to take visual measures as well as anything else.
Jacqui, sorry to interrupt you mid-flow. People are just putting in the chat box that the slides aren't moving their end. They just want to double check whether they should be.
I don't think, yeah, so I'm on slide 6 now. I don't quite know why then. Okay,
so I think you just,
I just keep pressing the next button.
I think maybe you need to put it into slideshow and go from beginning.
It says it is in slideshow.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case then,
should I carry on talking through and then you can share it if people want it?
Absolutely. I was going to say, or if you click on, do you see on the left hand side where I can see all the slides by number? Maybe you just need to click on them as you're going.
Like that?
Yes, that's it.
That work? Okay.
Yes. But don't worry, everybody. I'll send the slides out afterwards as well with the recording.
Okay. So can you see one that says 1 per table, rolling canteen? Is that the one you can see?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we literally physically took out equipment because obviously if it's not there, people can't be tempted. Obviously social distancing is adhered to as best we can. Obviously in those areas it's fairly straightforward, but on the shop floor in areas it's not quite that simple. So we obviously also added an extra room where people can go and eat their lunch if the canteen is too full. So again, we've laid out chairs so that they're far apart, put some 2 meter distance lines on the floor so that people can understand. And when we did have contractors on site, we asked them to use that room only so that they weren't mixing necessarily with all of the workforce. So that was an area where they could have a break and eat their lunches, because during this time we had to have 2 major projects take place. We would have loved to have cancelled them, but we didn't have any coil going forward, so there was absolutely no reason, we couldn't cancel it, so it had to go ahead. So there were a couple of weeks where we had quite heavy contractor activity, so we wanted to create a separate space for them as well. So going forward, we did stop the plant and we did fog. So I don't know if you know what fogging is, but basically it's a sanitization of the building and the equipment within it. So we had an opportunity where we only had a couple of production lines running, so we decided to turn them off and fog the whole place so that it's then completely sterile. And then we knew that from that point, ground zero, everything was as clean as it was ever going to be. And then obviously the trick then was to keep maintaining that level of cleanliness. That was quite a big business decision, because of course we lost production for 12 hours on the 3 lines that would have ran, which is essentially about 4.5 million cans. So then it went through to signage. One thing we did do on this slide, you'll see at the bottom, there's like a little metal bracket on the door. So that's to put your foot on, so you can open the door with your foot, so that people didn't have to keep using the handles, which is obviously quite a high contamination point potentially. So they are on all of the doors around the factory. So on both sides, obviously, so you don't have to use your hands if you don't want to. Extra sanitizer, as I'm sure everybody else has got, all the way around the plant. Lots of guidance and communication. So this is these notices are around the plant, just showing what we're doing with regards to COVID and safety, how to use their PPE, social distancing, etc. But again, it's that visual thing that we're trying to keep people informed, and also remind them as they're walking around the plant what they need to be doing. We've now moved to infrared temperature recording, so a bit like what they would have maybe at the airport. So you walk through a little walkway, it's set up in the canteen, and you literally, it takes your temperature digitally via the infrared, so it's a much more accurate reading than perhaps some of the handheld thermometers that aren't in reality designed to take 40 people's temperatures twice a day. You know, so it gave our employees more confidence in the readings that we were getting from the temperature check-in rather than the handhelds. So that is now in operation. Additionally, we've got signage, you know, even more signage and hand sanitizers around. So as we've gone through this, you know, people have asked us, oh, can I have it here? Can I have it there? We've talked with the unions quite a lot. So we're just trying to reassure everyone and make the facilities available. The trick is to not run out. So we're just trying to keep stock levels the same. I think initially people did take it, but again, we weren't concerned about that because ultimately they're cleaning their hands whether they're home or here. So, you know, we didn't worry about that too much. That seems to have lessened somewhat now. So stocks are lasting a little bit longer, but we think it's not because they're using it less, it's just that they're not taking it home. Where we can't socially distance on the shop floor, we've got these FP2 masks, which give a little bit more protection than the surgical type ones. So in the tasks where they cannot socially distance, FFP2 masks are compulsory. Our shop floor is really hot, so it's quite uncomfortable for people to wear that kind of mask every minute of every day. So those that need them are issued with them, and then all of the times they wear the surgical type ones. We've currently closed all of the coffee rooms, so we issue free drinking water that they can have on the line, so they can help themselves to that at any time. And then obviously now we're going through more masks, a proper disposal bin. So it's not clinical waste as such, but we're just making sure that we dispose of all the masks together, just as an extra precaution, just in case things are contaminated. So it's getting a bit warmer. So outside, we've added further outside eating areas, as you can see. We do have one already. And what we found was, because we didn't say, you know, you can't gather on this walkway, people gathered on the walkway. So, you know, to give them more spaces outside, because there's lots of restrictions for eating and drinking, you know, it just enabled them to be outside more. And get away from the noise. So we've added, that's our car park, so we've added some more tables out there. And then we implemented lots of things. So shift handovers are written, not verbal, again to minimise that crossover contact. We ask employees not to share lifts if they don't live together, because again, in the car, there is no way you can socially distance in a car. We wrote to all employees and sent them the letters to home addresses, not only to make sure everybody got one, but also to reassure their families that we're doing absolutely everything we can and more to keep people safe. And we review everything weekly with the trade unions, because there are some measures that they would like us to loosen a little bit, such as the coffee rooms. But at the minute, we're just making sure that everyone behaves in the way they should behave with regards to distancing before we relax that. We've also bought, I think on the next slide, a handheld fogging machine so that we can fog the communal areas regularly, again, just to increase that sanitisation. And it's more for people's mental health, actually, that they know that they're coming into the cleanest possible environment that they can have. And then to improve morale, we gave everyone, or are giving everyone, some free pizza. So one night they don't have to bring their own food in. We can offer them a free meal, and it just happens to be pizza that's delivered to site. So the next steps, obviously, we have to start bringing people back from home, because our business isn't a fan of home working. So we're looking at one-way flows in offices where practical. Screening, so glass screens, perspex screens between desks, perhaps even only 2 people, you know, in a pod of 4 diagonally. So again, to try and increase the distance and not having people working back to back in those pods. And then the thing I'm working on currently is the welcome backpack. You know, so we can send our employees some of these pictures so that they, when they come back, particularly if they've been shielding and have been off for sort of 10 to 12 weeks, they won't have seen any of these measures particularly. So the idea is to send them a letter, maybe their first couple of masks, because they'll need them as they come in, some pictures of the canteen and other areas, just that when they come in, it's not a shock to them. We'll probably delay their start time on their first day back so that we can welcome them back personally, outside of, you know, shift handover and things like that, and just reassure them of all the measures that are in place, because obviously those that are shielding are more vulnerable, and they might need that extra reassurance. So they're the kind of practical things that we've been doing over the last sort of 3 months or so. It has been a people challenge without a shadow of a doubt. There's been lots of phone calls to employees who have been in isolation and other reasons for being off. So it has been a challenge, so we say somewhat, but I think people are getting used to this now. They are social distancing, so fingers crossed this does become an element of normal for them. And that's about it.
That's great, Jacqui. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Really, really informative. I think I could see people making notes. Obviously, I will send out the recording and the slides afterwards, so so don't worry if you did miss anything. But has anybody got any questions for Jacqui? So Rhiannon says, do you think team managers and leaders will need any different or new skills to deal with the new environment? Have you found that, Jacqui?
So I think everyone struggled with just the concept of social distancing. It's not normal in our environment. So we would look to consolidate when things get a little bit more normal and everyone's back in. But I don't think they need anything different than what we've picked up already. It might just be a consolidation of, look, what we actually achieved, rather than think of it as a negative, because lots of good things have come out of COVID-19. There's been some really good technologies that's come about, and some innovations that are fairly basic, like the base plate on a door, but actually if you think about it, that's quite a good idea. So I think what we'll do is we'll consolidate all of that and share it amongst everybody. But no, I don't think there's anything particularly new that we weren't aware of already.
Great stuff. I think when I was writing a blog this morning on mental health, and you know, I think from that perspective, I think team leaders and managers possibly need more support. I know that goes into the last huddle that we went through. I think there's more guidance and training that people need there. But Karen's asked, do you have a dedicated health and safety consultant to support you with all the measures that you've put in place?
Yeah, so we have a health and safety manager, and he has an engineer, but she's been shielding, bless her. So yeah, so he has worked, obviously the burdens fell on him quite a lot. The pictures are his, they're not mine. But yeah, we are fortunate. We have quite a small team, but we do have each function, so that has helped.
Okay, brilliant. And Emma's asked, how did you avoid car sharing? She's got 4 staff who tend to travel in together.
Yeah, so we just told them it's not acceptable. Unfortunately, we had to be quite tough with it, because you can't socially distance. We had one occasion where people said absolutely there isn't another way. So we said you need to wear a mask in the car then, because at least that's some sort of protection. Obviously, we are concerned with the environment, as we always would be, but health and safety takes precedent as far as we're concerned. So at this moment in time, everyone is adhering to our request not to car share.
I think, and please correct me, haven't the government now said that we can share cars as long as we have the windows open?
Oh, right,
So
I don't know.
I'm sure that that's come out, that we can now sit in a car with other people as long as the windows are fully open. Do check that though, but I'm sure that that's what I've heard. Rhiannon has also said, do you envisage any changes to business levels?
So we're quite fortunate in our plant that actually our order book has gone up, but yes, across the business itself. So we're a global business, but the European market is absolutely falling through the floor. So as a business as a whole, we are struggling. But our site, because we do food cans and beverage cans, the food market, of course, is increased. So therefore, the number of tins they need increases. So we have actually seen a benefit as a result with regards to volumes. But as a business wider, then yes, it is not a good picture.
Yeah, no, I think lots of businesses are having difficult times.
But we've been fortunate enough we've not furloughed or had to deal with any of that side of COVID. So that's been quite nice not to have had to done that side.
Yeah, lovely. So Kerry's asked, in relation to your COVID room, she said she thinks that you said people can go in there if they have a high temperature at work. Yeah. Who carries out the check and what protection is in place for the person carrying out the check?
Okay, so it would either be our EHS manager, or we have what we would call an emergency response team on site, which are our first aiders essentially, with a few of the skills. So they would deal with the check if someone was showing a temperature. Of course, now we've got infrared, so we would just wheel them back through the infrared. But yeah, absolutely, masks, gloves. We have got some aprons, but if it's just a temperature thing, you wouldn't necessarily need those. But yeah, it's just to isolate them for, like I say, because sometimes if you've got your heater on in your car or it's a really hot day, that can impact on things. But yeah, masks, gloves, PPE is mandatory when you're dealing with that.
Fantastic, thank you. And last question, I think. So when do you plan to open your offices, and what concerns do your office employees have about returning, if any?
Yeah, so we have started already. So we're looking, like I say, we're not bringing anyone back particularly until we've got some screens in place. So we've got one person who needs to come back from next week. And the reason we've chosen that person is, one, the team is a little bit in flux. So we need the team to be in place. So they work in the supply chain team. But also, actually, she is our most nervous person. So we've taken the decision to bring the most nervous people back first. And the logic behind that is they're coming back when there's least people in, and then they'll get used to that level. And then as we bring people in every week or every other week, one person at a time, they'll get used to that level of contact with people. So it might sound weird, but that's why we've chosen to do it that way. So she'll come back on Monday, and no one else will really come back either in the building or from other offices, because at the minute we've just spread everybody out everywhere until we've got some screens in place, which obviously are in high demand but are on order. So fingers crossed they'll be here soon. The business is not a fan of home working and never has been. We had what I would call a presidential address last week from the European president, and he very clearly indicated he wants people back. But right. What we will say is we have a plan. So it could be that not everyone's back till mid-August. It could be that actually in certain areas they'll always have to be 6 on 6 off because of the space that they actually work in. There is no way you'd get 12 people in that room without, within the 2 meters. But our philosophy on site is, as long as we have a plan, we can justify our plan. Almost the central business will have to get used to it.
Brilliant. Jacqui, thank you so much. I'll echo Rhiannon's comments. What she said, it sounds like you've worked really incredibly hard to get things in place, and you sound very organised. So thank you for sharing what you've been doing over the last couple of months, and obviously helping us with and other people with their planning. So if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, then I'll pass over to Anna. So Anna, can you, Anna's joining us today. As I said, Anna works for a membership organisation that supports different clients and businesses, and so she's going to share her insights and the advice that she's giving her clients. So,
hi everyone, thanks Eloise. I'm just going to share my screen with you also. Just bear with me. Share. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah. So my role, as Eloise said, is to support a number of clients. We support 1,200 in total, and that can range from an organisation size of 10 employees right through to multinational. So we have different businesses in different circumstances. So those first few weeks of March, I have to say, have been the busiest time of my career in my life. And digesting what the furlough scheme was all about, as changing day by day, let's just say, was a challenge. So when the government announced that we can all start a phased return to work, we did what we called a COVID secure roadmap. So as part of that, I've worked closely with our head of health and safety and identified these 8 areas. So our first stage was to engage with your employees, and as part of this, we proposed that businesses engage with a cross-section of employees, and this can include working with a group of management, a group of employees, working with your trade union representatives to carry out some research and get a feel for employees returning to work. So we created a document called a COVID Secure Action Plan, so these actions could be captured. We also wanted to advise that they gather the general feeling on returning to work, because each employee is going to have a different view as to coming back to work. So that would help the business understand the confidence of the workforce returning to work, identify any mental health or stress-related illness as a result of COVID-19, those that have been working from home, those that have been furloughed. We're all going to be going through different emotions, if you like. So I think the managers needed to gather that intelligence. So as part of that, we created an employee survey template that businesses could use to ask open questions of employees. And we recommended that this survey be sent out prior to them returning to work. Also, as part of the return to work is starting to bring employees back from furlough. Now, furlough has created a number of challenges, right from businesses deciding to make redundancies before furlough was announced. When furlough happened, it was bringing employees back and putting them on furlough. It's now understanding the changes in the scheme come July. It's using furlough as an alternative to redundancy. We've had problems with employees agreeing to furlough. We've had to go through a series of alternatives to redundancy should furlough not be agreed. And now we're facing the challenge of, yes, flexibilities are welcome to our industry, but we've also got the issue now of affordability. So when employers need to make that contribution, we're being told they can't afford that. And it's making that commercial decision whether to do redundancy now or to wait till the end of July. So as part of furlough, if you like, we had to create guidance on how to implement furlough. We've had to create a suite of letters to include the furlough agreement, recalling those back from furlough and extending furlough. We've had to create guidance around those alternatives being short-time working, layoff, pay cuts, pay increase freezes, flexible working. So we've had a whole suite of documents to create. There's also that encouragement for employees to work from home, and possibly if they can stay working from home, we've had that solution being welcomed by some of our clients because it actually reduced costs for them to stay at home. But alongside that comes with the guidance of, you know, what is home working, working from home and self-isolation. So you have the mental health around that. The risk assessments of DSE assessments, pregnant employees, viability to work from home, to creating a policy around home working and a temporary home working policy, again with all the letters associated with that. We then recommend that businesses understand their vulnerable employees, especially those that were advised to shield. Now, bringing those employees back to work, businesses need to understand that it's likely they've got a disability, so they fall under the Equality Act. So it's advising on the reasonable adjustments to put in place for those that return. We've also had to go through the queries of employees with childcare responsibility. And as Jacqui said, businesses want all staff back. Now, those that had childcare in place before COVID, they haven't got the childcare in place now. So to force people back is just a no-no because of the potential risk associated around that. So it's just managing those frustrations with clients and alternatives to use. But again, attached to that is all the guidance on managing stress and anxiety, continuing to work from home and flexible working options.
Anna, how, because from listening to you, it sounds like some of your organisations have been more negatively affected than obviously Jacqui's organisation, which is where sales have increased. How have your clients been able to consider engagement, and what advice have you given them in relation to engagement during this time?
So during the phased return to work, the advice we've given is to use these templates. So looking at the employee survey, which obviously asks them a series of questions with regards to coming back to work. But also if they're furloughed, it's obviously keeping in touch with staff. But also around if they are facing restructures, then we've advised them to write to all employees to ask for their input, to get their view on alternatives to redundancy, to see if we can consider anything other than the worst case scenario, if you like.
Okay, great, thank you.
So the next stage is obviously planning the return, and that's, you've probably seen from the government, is the risk assessments. So we've pulled together the risk assessment templates, and these have been employee specific. Return to the workplace assessment, so assessing the actual workplace, looking at also any mobile workers and what those risk assessment looks like. It's then a case of introducing change to prevent the virus spread, so this means clients reviewing their policies and procedures, and like Jacqui said, is introducing all your guidance and notices around sites. We then need to communicate the changes through to all employees and introduce a return to work induction. So that's not only the changes that have been made to sites, but also what employees may have missed. You know, as I said earlier, people are forgetting their passwords and logins because we've been at home. So it's just that refresh of when they're back on site. There then needs to be some sort of monitoring in operation. So check that the changes are in place, check that they're working. Obviously monitor policies where employees, are they complying, are they not complying, and to continue to seek ideas on how operation can be changed and improved going forward. So, you know, this has kind of created an ongoing two-way communication process that some businesses may not have had in place before, but because we have been remote, it's created, you know, where we are talking more to each other. It's also forced a lot of our businesses, because we are manufacturing, to work virtually. You know, some of my clients have never used Zoom before, and now we are. But as a positive out of that, it means that we can use this platform going forward. So we've got smarter ways of working. To then look at taking further action and improve COVID secure going forward, because our health and safety team go on site and they do their risk assessments. So it's looking at ways of working and improved ways of working that we can help them with. And then we recommend that our clients publish a COVID secure certification. So like myself, I am regional and I will go out on sites, but we ask for sight of the certification so we can feel assured that that site is COVID secure before we make a 2-hour journey. So for us, it's been a challenge, it's been a journey. You know, trying to translate government advice on a daily basis has been a challenge again, and waiting in anticipation for the Chancellor's announcement on furlough and trying to interpret that. And again, we're waiting for guidance come the 12th of June. You know, it's not easy because people need to manage their business and manage their cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's been a learning curve, let's say.
I think it's been a steep learning curve. And that's part of what the huddle's about, being able to share and pool information, so to help us all. But that was great, Anna, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions in the information that well, Rhiannon, that's fine, you don't need to worry about asking questions, we love questions. Okay, how have you found managing change during this time? You know, with lots of things changing, you know, I guess putting yourself in your client's shoes, how have they coped with the constant change management aspect?
Not very well, to be honest. You know, it can be quite, because a lot of our businesses are family owned and people have worked at those businesses all their life, so employees feel part of the family, and then when they get to the point that they've got to potentially make redundancies, they're heartbroken. So it's quite exhausting. You feel like a coach as much as you do a HR advisor with them, and you feel for them, you really do. So we've tried to seek alternative ways as best as we can. We've tried to utilise the furlough scheme as best as we can. They've each had their problems with trying to get the grants because they took their time to come through. And it's also managing risk for them, and sometimes it's hard that you feel like don't shoot the messenger type of situation, but you have to identify the risks. And one of the hardest thing is because furlough is completely new concept, there's no case law around it. You're advising on the unknown, if you like, because you're advising on a potential risk, but having no case law in place, that's the best you can do.
Yeah.
So
and Anna, I'm sure you're doing a fabulous job, and hopefully through the HRHuddle you can make sure that you get some support as well, because I imagine for all of you it's incredibly draining when you're the person that everybody looks to for answers all the time, for answers and for positivity. So, you know, my hat's off to all of you for the great job that you're doing. If anybody else has got any questions for Anna, please put them in the chat box. Thank you, Anna, hugely. I'm going to pass on to Keeley, because I am conscious of time for everybody, and Keeley and I have got quite a lot of questions that we want to go through for you. So thank you, Anna. Keeley, would you mind unmuting yourself if you can? So I think everybody knows Keeley. She's an extremely qualified and experienced employment lawyer. So what we've done is we've put together a list of questions, some of which have come from you guys, and some that Keeley and I have put together. So we're going to do it as more of a Q&A. So Keeley, can you talk? Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I can hear you. That's wonderful. So can we just start with? We'll obviously start with welcome, and how will the coronavirus job retention scheme change from the 1st of August? Because obviously we all know it's going to change, but would you just outline that for us?
Yeah, okay, so we had the announcement on the 29th of May from the Chancellor, indicating that there is going to be the change on the 1st of August. So just to recap, the scheme came into force on the 20th of March, and employers were able to access a scheme and apply for the grants on the 20th of April. So there was that time lag between funding the continuing wage payments and then making the applications via HMRC portal, which of course has caused some problems for some employers. And albeit the loans were in place or announced to be in place to assist in that time frame between paying out and claiming from via the HMRC portal, I know that those loans have been quite difficult to access. So it has put a lot of employers in a number of difficulties. Okay, so the grants were available from the 20th of April. The HMRC portal was turning them around pretty quickly, so that was good news, to recover 80% of the wages of furloughed staff up to a cap of £2,500 a month. From the 1st of August, this will change. So employers will be required to pay the employer national insurance contributions and employer pension contributions on the furlough pay. So that's the first change for the first month, because of course at the moment those are being covered by the grant. Then we move to September, and then employers are going to be required to pay 10% of the employee's furlough pay. So, and that'll be capped. It will be capped at £2,187.50 per month. Mm-hmm. And then finally in October, employers will be required to pay 20% of the employee's 80% furlough pay, and that's capped at £1,875. So the incremental increases, the incremental contributions that the employers are going to have to make, and it'll be interesting to see if therefore that doesn't result in more employers being forced to consider redundancies, which I'll move on to in a moment. Okay, so next question, Eloise.
So when will the coronavirus retention scheme be closed to new entrants?
Yeah, okay, so it's closing to new entrants from the 30th of June.
Right.
So from that point, employers will only be able to furlough employees that they have furloughed for a full week, 3-week period prior to the 30th of June. So it means that the final date by which an employer can furlough an employee for the first time will be the 10th of June, because the 3 weeks will then end on the 30th. So if you want to continue furloughing employees beyond the 30th of June, and you've got new employees who you want to furlough, you've got to put them on furlough by the 10th of June.
So that means then, just from, to clarify the understanding, you then can't take people off furlough and then put them back on after that time?
Yeah, you can. So if you've got somebody who has previously been on furlough, you can put them on furlough again from the 1st of July. That's absolutely fine. But it's if you haven't ever put these people on furlough. Okay. So for those people for those employees or workers who you have not furloughed before, but you think you might need to, then you need to get them on furlough by the 10th of June.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you, Keeley. So what's coming up for lots of people now, though, is the procedure that employers need to take to, or they need to follow to end furlough. So what should we be doing there?
Okay, so the first thing to look at is your furlough agreements. So they should detail the circumstances in which you can bring people back into the workforce and end furlough. It's bound to be in the agreement that you can give notice. So an employer will give notice to end the furlough period and return their employees to the workplace or home working. So it might be that you are required to give a designated period of notice to end furlough, or it might be under the furlough agreement that you've stated that you require employees to return immediately. If the immediate applies, then just make sure you're giving reasonable notice, just so that the employees can put in place measures that they might need to put in place to get back to work. You know, don't give them an hour's notice. So immediate is reasonable notice. We need to give written notice. So it has to be in writing, and ACAS has helpfully provided a draft template letter, which you can find on the ACAS website, which details what you are required to state in your notice to return employees from furlough. The ACAS guidance states, though, that employers and workers should talk as early as possible prior to ending the furlough period. And this is something that Anna and Jacqui, Anna in particular, has indicated. And it appears that there's this ongoing consultation, which is key. You know, just don't, an employer really shouldn't just drop it on an employee and say, right, you're required to return to work next week. There needs to be a bit of consultation, not just giving a date of return. There has to be, you know, more information given to reassure employees that an employer has taken the necessary measures to ensure their safety on returning to work. So the consultation will include things about when staff are going to be required to return to work. And it might not be a fixed date at the moment. It might just be something that the employer is saying it could be around this time or the other. How staff will travel to and from work. Because obviously the recommendation is that public transport isn't used. But then we also touched upon car sharing, and Jacqui indicating that that's been indicated as a suggested not to do. However, taking on board Eloise's comments, if you've got the windows open, that might be all right. So we need to discuss also how the employer is reviewing and managing health and safety within the business, and any planned adjustments to take into account the recommendations by the government. Hand washing facilities, staggering, desks, screens, all those things that Jacqui and Anna have talked about. And then whether there might be a phased return of the workforce. And this is going to be probable. So, and it might be that we need to look at bringing some people back early and some people back later, which is what we touch upon in a moment.
So I think you've answered question 4, haven't you, about what an employer should provide. Can I just step back a second, Keeley, because we've had a question from Marie. So if, and this is back on the furlough, so if current staff furloughed return, say on the Monday, could you refurlough that same employee again at a later stage after the 1st of July? I think you answered.
Yes. Yeah, as long as you have furloughed an employee before the 10th of June, well, the end of June really, then you can refurlough them from the 1st of July. It's somebody who's an employee who you've never ever furloughed before. Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to re-clarify that for Marie. Lovely. So going back to, we're talking about phased return to work from furlough. So how should an employer select which employees should return ahead of others?
Okay, so it might be quite straightforward. It might be a case of somebody conducts a standalone post, i.e. a post that isn't comparable to anybody else's post, and you need that work conducting as you level up the business or you reopen. So you can give the required notice to the employee, obviously consult with them about the return, ensure their safety, and they will return to work. Now, if there is a group of employees who are conducting the same or similar work, but you don't require all of the group to come back, then it's going to be a case of you entering into a selection process and applying a selection criteria to that pool to select those who return and those who stay on furlough. Now, that criteria we need to ensure is objective and not tainted by any kind of discrimination. And it's essential, obviously, it meets the business needs at the relevant time. I take on board people's comments about childcare arrangements. Not all children are back at school, so it might be that within the criteria, childcare is part of the criteria and relevant criteria to consider in determining who should be brought back and who shouldn't be brought back, because people who haven't got any childcare are probably going to be unable to return to work. So it's worth considering that as part of the criteria. Very much like a redundancy selection criteria, we're applying it to the pool, we're consulting about it, we are giving employees the opportunity to comment, and those then that are selected to return, we give them appropriate notice to return. Those who we've selected not to return and who will remain on furlough, ensure the communication is kept up with those people too. And advise them that they will remain on furlough, but this is the date on which we may require you to return, or it's probable that you will be required to return on this date. So making sure we don't ignore those people, and we're keeping up the consultation, we're keeping up the communication with those people as well.
Okay. We've had a comment from Rhiannon just saying that she's been told the opposite about returning to work after furlough, that no selection criteria is needed, more that to agree a sensible way with employees, but yes, a selection process wasn't needed. What's your advice and view on that?
Well, I think you'll need a selection process, because if you're ultimately deciding who should and shouldn't return, then there'll need to be a selection criteria that you apply. Now, I'm not saying it has to be, you know, the usual disciplinary action, attendance level, flexibility that you might ordinarily see in a redundancy selection criteria. It's got to meet the business needs at that time. So, but there will need to be some element of selection, because if you don't require all of the pool to come back, you're going to need to determine who should and who shouldn't come back. Now, yes, if you can consult with employees, the pool, and agree with them a way forward, even better, because you're putting it in their hands. But ultimately, if there isn't an agreement on that, then you're going to have to stipulate some kind of selection criteria.
And best to be on, and best to document it so you've got that just in case. Yeah. And Karen's just added, she was on a legal call last week and they noted a clear selection criteria should be used.
Yeah, I think inevitably you will. You'll need to, but and as objective as possible. But if you can involve employees within the group about the selection criteria, then yes, fine, that's appropriate, and yes, it would be helpful.
Brilliant, great. And what if an employer needs to temporarily reduce the hours of work of some of the returning employees? How do we go about that?
Okay, so this is the flexible furloughing. So this was announced again on the 29th of May by the Chancellor, that from the 1st of July, furloughed employees will be able to return to work on a part-time basis. So employers will then pay in full for the hours that the employees are working, and then they will claim from the fund the element of the furlough pay that they can in respect of the hours, their usual hours, that they are not working. Further guidance is going to be published about this on the 12th of June, which I think is what Anna is also referred to. So we'll see more detail about that. Saying that, there is some guidance fact sheet that has been published. And I'll just go through briefly some of the things that the fact sheet say, because it is helpful. So from the 1st of July, employers can bring back to work employees that have previously been furloughed for any amount of time and any shift pattern, while still being able to claim the grant for their normal hours that are not worked. So obviously this is a big change, because at the moment, employers are not able to require employees to do any work for them. So it's a big change. So from the 1st of July, then, employers will be able to agree any working arrangements with previously furloughed employees, when claiming the grant for furloughed hours, employers will need to report and claim for a minimum period of a week. Now that's fine if you are claiming for months or every 2 weeks, which most employers will be. So, but as long as it's a minimum period of a week, then they'll claim for that. This is important. To be eligible for the grant, employers must agree with their employees in writing any new flexible furloughing arrangements and confirm it in writing. This means that employers will need to amend their current furlough agreements or provide new ones to their employees. So that's key, as it was before that we had furlough agreements in place. This means that we must have these flexible furloughing arrangements in place, and we have them confirmed in writing. And then employers can claim the grant for the hours their employees are not working, calculated by reference to their usual hours worked in the claim period. And further details of this will be provided in the guidance that's going to be published on the 12th of June. So it's going to be helpful potentially to a lot of employers.
I think that's going to be great to have people being able to work.
Exactly. So we'll see how that progresses.
Okay, fabulous. But what if an employer needs an employee to return to work, but conduct work outside of their normal role when they come back?
We might have seen this happening at the moment, presently as well. So the employer doesn't need them to do all of the same role that they are employed to do. They might be required to do bits of another role as well, maybe to fill their time while they're back at work. Now, check the contracts of employment, make sure that there is a provision in the contract which indicates that the employee may be required to conduct additional duties outside their normal job remit from time to time. And if you have got that clause in the contracts of employment, then you can rely on that and make reference to that in communicating with the employee about what they're being required to do outside their normal role. Obviously, it has to be similar to the work that they're ordinarily employed to do. We can't ask them to do something that is very far removed from their present role, but if it's within their reasonable remit, then I think that would be fine. If we haven't got that clause in the contract, then we need to make sure that we consult with the employee and obtain their agreement to change their role temporarily in that way, and hopefully get their agreement to do it, and then they return to work doing their own role, but also that slightly adjusted duties too. Okay,
great stuff. And holidays are quite a hot topic for furlough. So how should an employer deal with holidays for employees when we're ending furlough? Because obviously they've been accruing holiday throughout their furlough, haven't they?
They've been accruing holiday through the furlough, but they can take holiday during furlough as well. Now, some employers may have chosen to say to their employees, you are not permitted to take holiday during furlough. That's absolutely fine, because when an employee is on holiday during furlough, then the employer will need to top up their pay to full pay. And obviously they can recover the 80% at the moment, capped at £2,500 a month, but they wouldn't be able to recover the 20% top up. Now that might be fine if an employer is actually paying the full pay whilst employees are on furlough, but if actually they've agreed with the employee to reduce their pay, the employee's pay, to the furlough sum, then obviously when the employee goes on holiday during furlough, they've got to then top it up by the 20%, and they're obviously liable to pay that 20%. So this has led to some employers saying, we're not requiring employees to take holiday, or we're not allowing employees to take holiday during furlough. Some employers have taken a different view and thought, well, actually, I might as well allow employees to take holiday. It then releases the holiday so that it's not piling up, and that liability isn't piling up, and I haven't got to try and fit it in for when they return. So it's been, some employers have decided to do it if they financially can, and others haven't. So if we want then employees to take their holiday or some of their holiday before the end of furlough, then we can, and that will enable then the employer to reduce that holiday liability before the employee comes back, and it will also enable the employer to recover percentage of the pay through the furlough scheme. So then the employer is only paying the top up. Yeah. If, however, employees don't want to do that, that's absolutely fine. The employee returns, and then the employer can say to the employees, look, we can't allow you to take a holiday at the moment because we need you back in. We're levelling up the business. But if employees are not able to take holiday, then the employer has to, and tell the employees that has to carry over the holiday to the next holiday leave year or the following holiday leave year. So we've got 2 holiday leave years that they can carry over the holiday into. The ACAS guidance is very clear, as is the COVID guidance. Please try and allow employees to take their holiday within the relevant holiday leave year. But if you have no choice and because of COVID you're prevented from being able to do that, then yes, it then can be carried over to the next 2 holiday leave years.
Okay, brilliant. But we can refuse to allow employees to take annual leave for a period of time after they come back from furlough.
And that's the next question, isn't it? Yes, you can.
So
because if you've got people back and you think, well, actually, I can't now allow employees to take holiday, I'm just levelling up, I need everybody back, then yes, you can then say, no, you're not permitted to take holiday, but you need to tell employees that if they can't take it in this leave year because of this, then they need to take it, they can carry it over to the next 2 holiday leave years. Yeah.
Brilliant. What if the employer doesn't need all of its furloughed employees back to return to work at all?
Okay, so we're looking at redundancies now. If a redundancy situation exists, then we need to consider the roles affected and also the length of service of the employees. So if the employees have, or the affected employee has 2 years service or more, we need to ensure that we follow a fair procedure in making that employee redundant. And if we don't, we're going to potentially face a successful claim for unfair dismissal. So consultation is key in a fair redundancy process. Consultation is difficult whilst people are on furlough, or can be difficult, but you can consult through Zoom meetings, through any other video meetings, or if you're not able to do that, or the employee's not able to do that, then telephone calls are absolutely fine as well. So you can conduct a redundancy process and you can make employees redundant during furlough. And that is clear under the guidance. Saying that, an employer needs to consider alternatives to redundancy in order to make the redundancy process fair. So an employer will be required to consider any suitable alternative work that can be offered to the employee to avoid their redundancy. And it will need to consider continuing to furlough an employee in order to avoid redundancy. And as long as the employer has considered that and has discounted it, and can document all of this investigation work and consideration, then the dismissal should be fair. Now, of course, since the published guidance whereby the employer will need to contribute towards the costs of furloughing employees from the 1st of August, that may justify a redundancy from 1st of August on the basis that it's going to increase costs for an employer to retain employees on furlough rather than make them redundant. So if redundancies are inevitable, then it might be the case that redundancies from August, as long as an employer has considered the alternative to keep them on furlough, the redundancy will probably be fair. Other alternatives, asking for volunteers for redundancy. if the contract permits, laying off employees or placing them on short-time working. So layoff being laid off, not required to work, and then the only liability for the employer is to pay statutory guaranteed payments for up to 4 days. And then short-time working being them conducting half their normal hours of work. You have to have a contractual right to be able to do that with your employees. Just a quick note on that, sorry Eloise. It's key to know how many employees are potentially affected by redundancies, potential redundancies, and or forced contract changes. If we are looking at 20 or more employees, then we need to go through what's called collective consultation. So keep your eye on the numbers. As I say, if it's affecting 20 or more employees in a period of 90 days or less, and that includes both redundancies as well as forced changes to contract terms, then collective consultation applies. So you need to take some legal advice on that.
Okay, brilliant. And obviously, as ever, you're available for legal advice, aren't you?
I am.
You're available. So will the job retention scheme pay redundancy payments?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was simple, wasn't it?
It was simple.
But will the job retention scheme cover notice pay?
It may well do, and this all depends on whether or not in the contract of employment the employer is required to give statutory notice. That's 1 week for each completed year of service, up to a capped amount of 12 weeks notice. So statutory notice or a longer period of notice, and that has to be 1 week or more longer than statutory notice. So that's the key really. If an employer is required to give only statutory notice, then they will have to pay full pay during the period on which the employee is on notice, but they can recover the percentage, 80% down to 70, down to 60 through the fund, while the employee remains on furlough. So this is key in that making redundancies whilst an employee is on furlough, potentially an employer can recover the furlough pay from the furlough pay element of the notice pay. Yeah, so that will assist an employer with that notice pay liability. They'll have to pay the top up, but the furlough amount will be paid for by the fund. If you are paying in lieu of notice, that will not be covered by the fund. So no element of it will be covered by the fund.
Okay, great stuff, Keeley. I think that's cleared up a lot of questions people had on that. Can I just jump back slightly to holidays, because Tracy's got a quick question. She says that her understanding is that an employee can only carry over their holidays if they can't take in the current year, rather than if they don't want to take it because they're working from home and can't go abroad, for example. Is that right?
That's quite right, yes. Yes.
So it's only if as a business we say you can't take it.
Yeah, and it's in effect if they're prevented from taking the holiday because of COVID, because the effects of COVID on the workplace, on the employee. So if that applies, they can carry over. If they don't want to take it, then that's immaterial. They lose it in the normal way.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, and I've spoken to a lot of people recently, and HR people, and they've told me that they're experiencing an increased request for flexible working, which is not surprising. How should we be dealing with flexible working requests?
The same way as before. Yeah, so check your flexible working policies. If there is a set procedure detailed in those, follow that procedure. Ordinarily then, if if there is no procedure, then the statutory procedure applies. So the employee is required to put their request in writing. The employer then considers the request and may or may not decide to hold a meeting, confirms their decision in writing. If they are rejecting the request, it has to be for one of the 8 stated statutory permitted reasons to reject the request. And they include the burden of additional costs. I mean, they're all easily accessible on the ACAS website. So we're looking at the burden of additional costs, detrimental effect on ability to meet customer demand, inability to reorganise work amongst existing staff, inability to recruit additional staff, detrimental impact on quality, detrimental impact on performance, insufficiency of work during the periods the employee proposes to work, planned structural changes. So as long as you are referring to one or more of those 8 permitted reasons and they apply, then you can reject the request. So, you know, any request for flexible working during furlough is treated in exactly the same way.
Right, okay. Because although what COVID-19 has obviously proven is, obviously we can work from home, we can work more flexibly, but a lot of businesses moving forward don't necessarily want to support that. Yeah. If you think of the feedback that I'm getting.
Yeah, and that might be the case, because when everything gets back to normal, if normal we ever get back to normal, then it will be exactly the same as before. You will be rejecting those requests on the basis of one of those permitted 8 reasons, and you know, treating them in exactly the same way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great stuff. I've got another scenario for you that we've had in from somebody. They've got a situation where they took 2 ex-employees back onto payroll specifically to furlough them, to help them out. So from August, the business will need to pay the NI and the employer pension. Is it appropriate to give them notice that the business will not be able to pick up that additional cost and end the furlough from the end of July?
If that's the case, yes. Check the furlough agreement that they entered into with those 2 particular employees, which hopefully might be quite specific on when and how the furlough ends. But yes, change of circumstances. Now the employer is required to pay something towards the cost of those employees remaining on furlough. So yes, you would ordinarily give notice under the furlough agreement to end the furlough period.
Great stuff. And I think the key is just communicating with people.
It is, yeah.
And Sue's asked a question, and I think, Sue, is this in relation to redundancy? The question. Yes, yeah, okay. So Sue said, if those on furlough are part of a team, she said she presumes they have to use the selection criteria for the whole team. It wouldn't be the person that's on furlough that would automatically be selected for redundancy.
No, and sorry, apologies, I didn't go through the selection process for the redundancies, because I think I'd covered it slightly earlier when we're talking about people bringing people back off furlough. But yes, if you are going through a redundancy process, consultation is key, obviously, but if you are talking about a team or a pool of employees, and some of those need to be made redundant, you apply a selection criteria to that pool to select those with the lowest score to be at risk of redundancy, and then you continue with the consultation with those at risk employees. Key to have objective selection criteria. Employees have input on that criteria or allowed to make comments on it, and objective as possible and not obviously tainted by discrimination. Does that cover the question, do you think?
Yeah. Yes, yeah, Sue's nodding, that's great, fantastic. Keeley, thank you so much. You've been brilliant as usual, and really informative and really clear on, you know, complicated subjects for us. So has anybody got any other questions that they want to pose to Keeley before I close the meeting? No, I think everybody's okay. So as usual, you know, Keeley is available. I will, when I send the recording, I'll make sure that her contact details are on there for you, so you can make contact if you do need some actual legal advice. But thank you so much, Keeley. Thank you, Jacqui and Anna, for your inputs as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope you found it useful. I hope you've taken something out of the information and the presentations that we've had. I will circulate all the information as well. I will continue to do huddles for the time that they're useful and of value for you all. So if there are any topics that you'd like me to tackle in the future, please just drop me a message on Facebook, LinkedIn, email, or pick up the phone and speak to me. And I can make sure that we can get speakers, so we are covering the topics that that are of benefit to you. And for anybody who doesn't know yet, I'm sure you're aware we've got the private LinkedIn HRHuddle group. I've set up something similar on Facebook, because what I found is Facebook tends to be far more quicker to respond. People are far more engaged in that area, so it's much better for general communication and people supporting each other. So if you haven't had an invite to join the HRHuddle Facebook group, let me know, because it's a private group. You need to be invited to be able to comment and to be able to see anything on there. So it's a confidential platform that we can all talk in. So if you can search for it, it's HRHuddle East Midlands, and you can request to join or contact me and I can invite you to join. So that'd be great. But thank you so much to everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day. If you've got any questions, feel free to pick up the phone and speak to me, and I can put you in contact with the people that you need. So thank you very much and take care. Bye.